You're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. These are the headlines. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to halt military strikes on vessels in the Black Sea and pause attacks on energy infrastructure, the White House reports. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned US strike on Yemen. Afghanistan loses millions of dollars annually due to the impacts of climate change. The country is pursuing green energy initiatives focusing on solar and wind power. A deal has been reached between American and Russian negotiators on ending military strikes against commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The White House says it believes progress is being made towards ending the conflict in Ukraine and that peace talks will continue. Our correspondent, Ubay Shahbandar, has more from Washington, D.C.
Following days of intensive talks in the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh, the United States, Russia and Ukraine have reached an agreement to ensure the safe navigation of commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The agreement will ensure that the vessels carrying grain and oil will not be targeted. As part of a deal negotiated between Moscow and Washington, the U.S. also agreed to help restore Russia's access to global markets for their agriculture and fertilizer exports, as well as lowering maritime insurance costs and enhancing Russian access to ports and payment systems related to transactions on the international markets. Russia's access to international markets has been severely restricted due to punishing American and European sanctions that were imposed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a statement posted by the White House on Tuesday, the Trump administration stated that the U.S. and Russia will further develop measures for implementing President Trump's and President Putin's agreement to ban airstrikes against energy facilities of Russia and Ukraine. The White House also announced that Moscow and Washington will continue to work towards achieving a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. This deal is a result of separate negotiations that the U.S. held with Ukraine and Russia. It is widely viewed as a stepping stone towards peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. U.S. officials will also continue to work in brokering exchanges of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children held in Russia. Securing the safe navigation of grain and energy shipments from the Black Sea is expected to help stabilize impacted global supply chains, many of which are dependent upon grain, seed oil, and fertilizer exports from Ukraine and Russia. This will also be good news to developing countries that have been particularly hurt by rising global food prices due to the war in Ukraine. Ubay Shahbandar, A News, Washington, D.C.
Joining us now live from Madrid, Spain, is Enrique Cuchero, a political analyst, to discuss the latest agreement attained between Ukraine and Russia through the US mediation. Good afternoon, Enrique. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Good afternoon.
Now, some analysts have been very quick to describe the Black Sea ceasefire deal as a tentative step towards peace, yet Moscow and Kyiv have accused each other of lying about the terms of the agreement. What's your evaluation?
I mean, this is not going to be the agreement, if you want to put that with capital letters. I think this is just a way to pass the time in order to reach another point of inflection into the conflict, and then a new tentative agreement. But I think this is just a bypass. It's not going to be the final thing, the ultimate thing about the conflict. We have to wait. That's my opinion.
Okay, and what's more specifically, what do you make of Russia's list of conditions suggesting that they won't commit unless certain sanctions are lifted and membership to the SWIFT payment network is reinstated?
Well, the thing on the sanctions is Russia needs to get to get on the speed as soon as they can, because right now the things are, I don't think financially and economically and inside the world, financial world order, Russia is doing right now great. One of the things that Russia trying to appear prone to an agreement is just the release of the sanctions. So as far as this works, Russia's going to keep on them. But I think that Russia got a very urgent objective, a very urgent goal for being released of that. So as I said before, I think this is just kind of in a lack of a better word, a performance in order to, in other things, release the sanctions.
Okay, Enrique, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your contribution.
My pleasure.
Now, US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has acknowledged creating a Signal group chat where sensitive details about planned US airstrikes on Yemen were leaked. While calling it embarrassing, he insisted that the information shared wasn't classified.
US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned US strike on Yemen. The information was shared in a Signal chat with Trump administration officials and a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. Goldberg's report, published on Monday, revealed that sensitive details about the operation, such as target information, weaponry and attack sequencing, were posted in the chat ahead of the May the 15th airstrikes. Goldberg was invited into the encrypted messaging group Houthi PC Small Group on March the 13th and described the leak as a shockingly reckless use of the platform. The Atlantic article raised concerns over the exposure of crucial military details. During an interview with Fox News, Waltz confirmed his role in setting up the chat.
It's embarrassing, yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is a bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
President Donald Trump says that no classified information was involved and expressed confidence in Waltz's performance as National Security Advisor. The White House has since confirmed that an internal review is underway and Trump was briefed on the matter. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who allegedly shared the operational details with Goldberg, dismissed questions about the leak, accusing the journalist of spreading misinformation. Hegseth defended the airstrike campaign, asserting that it was necessary to restore deterrence and secure freedom of navigation in the region. The leak drew sharp criticism from Democratic lawmakers who called for a congressional investigation into the potential breach of national security.
A serious security lapse in Washington made headlines after The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, was mistakenly added to a Signal chat where Trump officials discussed US airstrikes on the Houthis. In the latest edition of NewsHour, our host Guy Schoen discussed the issue with Newsweek contributing editor Peter Roth. Let's listen in on what the expert had to say about this unusual breach.
I will say, as mistakes go, this is a Butte, which leads the conspiratorial turn of my mind to wonder if it wasn't somehow planned. I can't see why they'd want to do that, but there's a slight possibility that exists. But typically, something like this would be blamed on bad staff work. I mean, you don't really imagine the National Security Advisor to the President sitting down at his computer and assembling a group chat. That would be done by staff. And I suspect that what happened is that they wanted one Jeffrey Goldberg and got a different Jeffrey Goldberg. The interesting question here, and I'm not sure I'm the one to provide the answer, but I can certainly raise it. Are the journalistic ethics involved in Mr. Goldberg not announcing that he was on the call and identifying himself? I'm not sure that if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't have done that. If I wouldn't have said, you know what, you've got me in this chat, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm leaving, despite the fact that it's a chance for a good story. I'm not so sure that publishing this was the right thing to do.
Turkey hopes to improve its relationship with the United States. The Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is in Washington for high-level talks with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a two-day visit. The meetings aim to strengthen bilateral ties and address key regional challenges.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on Tuesday. The two-day visit follows a phone call between Donald Trump and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan that a top Trump aide described as transformational. Ties between both countries have drifted away from a strategic partnership in recent years. The trip comes as Ankara wants America to remove sanctions and let the country back into a crucial fighter jet program. Ankara is seeking a warming of ties with Washington under the new administration. Discussions will cover a range of regional issues, including the situations in Ukraine, Palestine and Syria, with an emphasis on exploring further opportunities for cooperation.
Police intervened in unauthorised protests in Ankara against corruption and terror investigations into the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. One officer was injured and 34 demonstrators were detained. Protesters gathered in front of the Çankaya Municipality building, chanting slogans and holding banners. Tensions escalated as police warned them to disperse, citing the presence of provocateurs. When demonstrators threw stones and bottles, police responded with pressurised water. A similar protest at Middle East Technical University also saw police intervention as demonstrators blocked traffic. The Turkish Interior Minister earlier stated that authorities would not tolerate any attempts to disrupt public order or threaten national security. Germany has imposed new sanctions on Georgian officials over their role in what Berlin described as suppressing pro-EU protests, marking the second round of sanctions this year. Meanwhile, Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bokoshvili is visiting Hungary to strengthen diplomatic and economic ties. Our correspondent Nini Nikoshvili brings us all the latest details from Tbilisi.
Germany has imposed fresh sanctions on Georgian officials claimed to be responsible for what Berlin described as the crackdown on pro-EU demonstrations, while Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bokoshvili is on a visit to Hungary as part of wider diplomatic efforts to bolster Tbilisi's relations with individual European countries. The German Foreign Ministry announced entry bans on unidentified officials linked to what is described as suppression of the pro-EU demonstrations. This is the second round of sanctions from Berlin following the similar measures in December 2024. The move seems to testify to Germany's growing concern over latest political developments in Georgia, where protests demanding European integration have continued nearly for 3 months. Meanwhile, Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bokoshvili met with Hungarian counterpart Peter Szijjártó in Budapest, attending the Hungarian Ambassadors Conference and discussing economic and diplomatic cooperations. She emphasized Georgia's strategic role in regional infrastructure projects, including the Middle Corridor initiative with Azerbaijan, and thanked Hungary for its support within EU structures. While the Georgian government strengthened ties with Hungary, known for challenging EU policies, the opposition continues to seek support from Brussels. The opposition still leans towards EU integration, hoping that protests and international pressure could change internal political dynamics in country, whereas the government appears to foster closer ties to nations resisting the mainstream European policies. This is Nina Nikoshvili reporting from Tbilisi, News.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn in for a 7th term during a ceremony in Minsk.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko was sworn in for a 7th term on Tuesday during a ceremony held at the ceremonial hall of the Palace of Independence in Minsk. The event, which was attended by more than 1,100 guests, included a formal presentation of the national flag and the presidential standard just before Lukashenko's arrival. Lukashenko's re-election was confirmed after the 26th of January presidential election, where he secured more than 5.1 million votes, representing nearly 87% of the total votes cast. The 70-year-old president has been in power since 1994.
Kyrgyzstan has officially ratified a key border treaty with Tajikistan. The move marks a significant step toward resolving a century-long border dispute between the two nations. The two countries had been in disagreement over 503 kilometres of their approximately 970-kilometre border.
President Sadir Japarov of Kyrgyzstan has signed a law ratifying the treaty on the Kyrgyz-Tajik state border, which was agreed upon with Tajikistan on March 13th in Bishkek. According to the Presidential Press Service, Kyrgyzstan's Supreme Council approved the law on March 19th. The law was created to officially define the Kyrgyz-Tajik border and complete the necessary state procedures for recognizing and ratifying the treaty. The establishment of a legal framework between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan aims to ensure stability and security, improve conditions for citizens, especially in border regions, and strengthen socio-economic and humanitarian cooperation, the presidential administration stated. On March 13th, President Sadir Japarov and Emomali Rahmon held a bilateral meeting in Bishkek. Following their talks, they signed the treaty on the delimitation and demarcation of the Kyrgyz-Tajik border. The border issue between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has been going on since 1924, with the two countries repeatedly clashing. Thousands of people have been killed in conflicts along the border in the past 30 years. This agreement would settle issues related to nearly 500 kilometers of frontiers. It also includes clauses stipulating mutual access to water and energy facilities along the border.
The Armenian Parliament has approved the draft law on initiating the process of the Republic of Armenia's accession to the European Union. The civil contract faction backed the bill with 64 votes, while the opposition was split. One faction voted against and another abstained. The government also revised the wording, removing a reference to the will of the people, and emphasised democratic development, security and the rule of law. However, Deputy Foreign Minister Pariur Hovhannisyan clarified that this does not yet mean Armenia is officially applying for European Union membership. Over the past year, Armenia's trade with Russia has surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024. With Russia now making up over 40% of Armenia's total trade, this partnership is strengthening, but it also raises serious geopolitical questions.
Trade between Russia and Armenia has surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024. Russia now accounts for over 40% of Armenia's total trade, strengthening economic ties, but also raising concerns about possible sanctions risks. Russian Minister of Economic Development Maxim Reshetnikov reports that Russian investment in Armenia has reached $4 billion, making Russian businesses key contributors to Armenia's economy. During the first half of 2024 alone, Russia's share in the Armenian foreign trade increased from 36% to 44.4%. Interestingly, during the same period, Russian exports to Armenia increased by 4.4 times, reaching $7.5 billion. However, Armenia's increasing trade with Russia has raised Western concerns. With Russia facing sanctions, Armenia is seen as a potential transit hub for restricted goods, dual-use technologies, and financial transactions. Western officials worry that Armenia might be helping Russia bypass sanctions, which could lead to greater scrutiny or penalties from the US and the EU. Some experts are concerned that heavy reliance on Russia could put Armenia at risk. If Western countries impose secondary sanctions on nations aiding Russia, Armenia may have to balance its trade with Russia and its ties with the West.
Afghanistan loses millions of dollars annually due to the impacts of climate change, further destabilising its already fragile economy and social structure. However, due to political reasons, the country has been unable to secure funding from international donors to address climate challenges and improve climate-related infrastructure. More from Tamim Bahis in Kabul.
Climate change is becoming a major destabilizing force in Afghanistan, worsening its economic and social challenges. A new study by the Afghanistan Analyst Network estimates the country loses $550 million annually under normal rainfall, with losses surging to $3 billion in drought years. Despite contributing little to global emissions, Afghanistan is highly vulnerable to climate disasters. The World Bank estimates annual flood damage of $54 million, with extreme floods exceeding $500 million in losses. Drought causes $280 million in yearly losses, while avalanches, landslides and other climate-related hazards add to the toll. The country's stability is also affected by heat waves, wetland degradation and sandstorms. While the Paris Climate Agreement calls for support for countries like Afghanistan, donor funds have not materialized due to political reasons. The suspension of 28 climate projects worth $826 million further complicates the situation. Afghanistan's National Environmental Protection Agency has set a $3.48 billion funding target for climate projects from 2025 to 2030. However, the lack of international recognition raises doubt about receiving these funds. On a positive note, Afghanistan is pursuing green energy initiatives. Recently, the head of the Afghanistan Breshna Shirkat discussed renewable energy projects with Turkish 77 company, focusing on solar and wind power. Despite these efforts, Afghanistan remains vulnerable due to lack of promised climate adaptation funds. This is Tamim Bahis for A News in Kabul.
Thanks for joining us. Keep watching A News for the latest developments from around the world.